Hey, Ravi Lachhman with Harness, and today we're going to be talking about something very delicious, continuous donuts. You thought that CD stood for continuous delivery? Well, actually, you're correct, but let's take a look at how food influences technology. A little bit about me, Ravi Lachhman, evangelist again at Harness. I worked at a few firms as a distributed systems engineer. I worked at Aptdynamics, Mesosphere, Red Hat, and IBM. And throughout all these firms, my love of donuts has stayed true. And also, I had a lot of time engineering distributed systems. But let's take a look at something that might be a little bit closer to my area of expertise. Technology equals yum. Well, ironically, a lot of times when we're talking about technology, we're talking about feeds and speeds, but no one really uses taste. So today, let's talk about taste. And so what we have to do is supporting taste innovation. Here are some pictures of one of my favorite donut shops in the world. It's actually in Denver, Colorado, called Habitat Donuts. And if you're unfamiliar with Habitat Donuts' claim to fame is that they actually infuse their donuts with alcohol. So on the left is a rosé-infused strawberry donut. On the right is a whiskey-infused bacon-glazed donut. Now, I'm not sure who came up with this idea, but this type of innovation is crucial. And now, how would we go about, let's say that it was our first time making these donuts, what do we actually have to do to go through the innovation curve? So something I would like to call idea to production in the donut world. So let's take a look at a donut deployment pipeline. So when building a donut or making a donut, let's say it was our first time actually deciding, you know what, let's go ahead and make that rosé flavored donut or that whiskey flavored or infused donut. Now, the first thing is we have an idea, right? And the second thing is we have to go build the donut. So we have to go gather the raw materials, get the flour, get the sugar, get the eggs, get any sort of extracts. And we really have to gather our raw materials, which is pretty manual. And then after we make a few things and we actually build it, it's time to ask our coworkers if they taste good. And unfortunately, taste is pretty subjective, right? Ironically, software could be subjective too. And going up and building hype. So hype is always important. Like, hey, you know what? Is our donut tasting right? And most likely your coworkers who like you will say, sure. They're not going to be like, ew, yuck, because they want to support you, right? And then we're going to go ahead and deploy that donut. We're going to go deploy that delicious donut onto the countertop of, let's say, of our store. Let's say I was working at Habitat or we were working at Habitat Donut. It's going to be out in the wild. And this is where it now changes from our control to the control of our customers. For example, how do we go about verifying if someone likes a donut? Well, donuts are made to be eaten, right? And so we need to make sure that we have verification. Are people putting it on Instagram? Are people eating it? Are people generally happy? And then what we don't want to happen is seeing that people turning around and just tossing it in the trash and using your phone to say, where is the closest Krispy Kreme? Looking at Yelp or Google Maps for that. But if we take a look at the amount of time this actually takes, usually building something can take days, right? Like, hey, you know what? If it's just getting something right can take days, baking things, trying different variations. And then as you get to look towards the customer, the amount of time starts to decrease. For example, testing it could be a couple hours. Hey, Amanda or Bob, have you eaten my donut? And then deploying it, just taking it from the oven to the counter, takes minutes. And then verification if people are liking it, can take minutes. Or if it's rolling back, it could be sad, right? But again, the new treat pipeline from the inception towards the end, the time decreases as we move along the steps. But we have one problem here. I'm assuming for most attendees of CDCon, our donuts actually look like this. We're not in the physical donut business. Now, I wish we were. If you actually are an attendee and you're in the donut business, do hit me up. I would love to try one of your donuts. But our donuts typically look like this, like a pie chart, right? And so let's take a look at what the software development pipeline is. So we can actually break that out into the same number of steps. For example, building it, right? So building it, we're gathering raw materials. This could be from third-party open source to purpose-built or artifacts that we have. Testing it, sure, it's kind of automated, right? So this is going to be a large push for continuous delivery, as that we have some sort of test coverage, and then deploying it. Hey, you know what? Without continuous delivery or continuous deployment, you're deploying with custom scripts, and it's something that we're here to solve at CDCon. And then verification, right? So we're trying to tie all of this together. Hey, did someone like it? Unfortunately, there's no Yelp for software. We don't know, or we're not. People are Instagramming our endpoints or APIs, right? Unfortunately, and then rollback, which can be totally subjective, totally manual. And when building out a continuous delivery pipeline, this is exactly what we're trying to solve for. And it's actually, ironically, the inverse of building a donut. The build, from the CI perspective, we have down. But as we start getting into the testing, deployment, especially with the more, I'd say when we're in production, how do we validate something? If something went wrong, how do we roll back and roll forward? Those things can take a lot of toil. And this is where we have to build or start building our pipelines, right? So what is a continuous delivery pipeline? Well, basically we want to automate all of that. So for example, if one of the hard things to get right with this CD pipeline, and I'm sure some of the other speakers in different talks are touching on this, is that you always want to have two radio dials. You want to make sure that you're maintaining innovation on one radio dial, but also you want to make sure that you're maintaining business controls. And so as you progress stage to stage, one of the things to make sure is having a particular pipeline that is robust enough to have different sets of rule sets, right? So in the first stage, kind of leaving our dev machines, really, it shouldn't be any sort of surprise that the rule sets were under, for example, third-party open source analysis, unit tests, some sort of integration test that we're having, even our code coverage with static code analysis. Kind of going on, I like to call it tightening the screw or tightening the rope type of model, is that now we're taking a look at the environment as a whole. We just start doing smoke tests, we start doing perf tests. If there's any sort of, let's say, environmental security tests that we need to see for compensating controls, you're kind of running that in a different stage of our pipeline. And then finally we get to production. Instead of taking minutes, or for example, we want this to take minutes like the donuts, not hours like it usually takes. Are we doing some sort of canary if it's a currently in place deployment? Are we continuously running verification? Are we continuously running, let's say, perf test with actual production features and production horsepower, soak tests and whatnot? This is where we get to production. All of this to make sure our customers are happy. And the rationale behind all of this is continuous delivery, right? And the rationale behind this, again, is making sure that you're able to deploy as much as you want to deploy, or make as many donuts as you want to make donuts, right? So funny, here's a presentation. In a presentation I actually gave a webinar maybe a few months back, and with the CD Foundation here. And one of the things I used to talk about is a fear of deployment, like fear of missing out. If you Google, how many times a day should you deploy, or Amazon deploy, it's like, oh, they deploy less than every 12 seconds. If your organization is not there, or your donut shop or software organization is not there, you might feel left out. Don't worry, don't let the Lean Enterprise book make you feel bad. Everybody's organization is different. Everybody has a different style. Everybody has different tastes. Your organization is the best. And with that, I will leave you with, hey, don't be afraid to innovate. Don't be afraid to make that rosé or whiskey flavored donut. Making a treat is similar to making software, and I'm sure your software will delight your organization, your clients, internally, externally. Thank you, Ravi.